Good afternoon. It's Friday the 6th of May 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson, and I'm delighted to say that joining me from Scotland is David Scott. Good afternoon, David. How are things? How's the weather?
Good afternoon. It's hello from sunny Perth today. It's very nice, very warm, very mild, and even people from the south coast of England have been remarking to me how mild it is today. Very nice.
Well, we've had some technical issues today, so this is going to be a bit more relaxed UK Column News than usual. You've been at a conference yesterday. Brian was there with you, and a number of other people. So tell us a bit about that.
Yes, it was a huge amount of information, lots of speakers, and very high quality speakers at that. Lots of information to learn, and on a personal level, I came away tremendously impressed with a great many of the people speaking there, what they've gone through, the courage they had shown to speak out and to fight the injustice they were facing, and to do so with such dignity and precision and strength.
So was there a decent turnout at it?
There was a decent turnout. It was by no means full, and we would like to see in future events. I think more, the word getting around more and more people coming. But I think the people who were there got a lot from it, a lot from the event. And these things are always an opportunity to make contact with like-minded people and offer one another support and assistance. And I think they move us forward as a group, as a demand for justice, very considerably.
I mean, something you were saying to me earlier, David, was the impact that some of this has on people that have been affected by it. You were quite struck by this.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that's most remarkable is the amount of time it takes for people to reach a point where they can even talk about what has happened. There was one man there who had been abused as a small boy, sexual abuse as a small boy, and he then suffered 60 years of alcoholism, and only very recently, via therapy and talking and exploring why he was drinking, did he manage to defeat the alcoholism. So you see a life blighted, but at the end of that very long and painful path, he's been victorious over this. So the victory, it shows how much healing we can do late in life or at any point in life. But the length of time shows the amount of damage it's done initially, and the strains this puts onto people who have suffered in this way.
Indeed. Now, I know the event was filmed, so no doubt those videos will appear in due course. But I take it there's some enthusiasm for follow-up events.
Yes, I think there's other events planned. I think there's one down in is it Manchester, and I think there's one in Dundee. So there'll be more news coming out about those. So yes, there will be follow-up events, and hopefully this will be something that we'll see revisited as well in months and years to come, because it was a very worthwhile day.
Okay, well let's move on to other news. Obviously, the subject which is dominating today's news is the local elections and also the mayor elections. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen in the London mayor elections just yet, but it's fascinating to me, or at least one of the main talking points from this is the continuing attack on the Labour Party, and this was indicative of it in the Telegraph. Watch John McDonnell's awkward confrontation over Labour's leaked election memo. And if you watch the video clip, it's from the BBC's coverage last night. And the BBC had managed to get a copy of an internal memo, which was describing the language that the Labour Party intended to use in the event that they suffered badly in the elections. And this was read out without any prior warning in front of McDonnell, and he was kind of put on the spot on a live television programme. And actually, it wasn't really a confrontation at all. It wasn't even that awkward. And the only people that looked pretty stupid out of it were the BBC, it seemed to me. But nonetheless, this is indicative of the attack that's going on the Labour Party at the moment. And I guess if we look actually at the election results that were available just before we came on air, actually the Labour Party hasn't done as badly as was predicted by any means. They've lost 27 seats in the council elections, and they've lost one council. This is in England, of course, or is this? No, this is local elections UK wide. So they haven't done half as badly as was expected, and nonetheless, the tweets were coming out this morning describing how they had lost the entire Jewish vote, for example. And again, today, David, we've had Ken Livingstone on Sky News and other news channels again talking about Hitler and Zionism and really trying to stoke up this anti-Semitism allegation, which is being made against the Labour Party at the moment.
Mm. Yes, it's puzzling that Ken Livingstone should do that. Now we've discussed this last week, and we had a lot of sympathy for the fact that he's bringing forward certain facts which are historically accurate and we feel need to be understood and discussed so that a proper understanding of the historic events can be reached. But to continue this narrative now would seem a very strange political decision, because it's only going to stoke fires and perhaps reflect badly on the party he allegedly supports. I personally find myself in a strange position of, be careful what you wish for, because when I grew up, the Labour Party dominated Scotland. There was no opposition. It operated like a one-party state. It was arrogant. It had Stalinist and totalitarian streak in it a mile wide, and I did not like it at all. Now, however, I'm having to recognise certain other facts, that when I went along to the Sheikh Obeil march, who marches? Who marches for someone who's been killed by the police? It was the left wing that marched. It was the unions that marched. It was people who were prepared to get in the street and fight for someone who was murdered, killed unlawfully, I would suggest, and highlight this issue. And I'm now faced with, despite all the feelings I have about the Scottish Labour Party and the arrogance and graft and cronyism that was involved in that organisation, that you're saying, well, if that goes completely, where is the opposition going to come from? Where is there going to be another voice sufficiently well organised to do anything? It is a worry.
If you're talking about a totalitarian state under Labour in the past, although she didn't get a majority this time round, you've pretty much got that, though, haven't you?
Yes, we do. Now, this is a sign that's a couple hundred yards from my house in Perth, and it's a slightly embarrassing sign for the SNP, because it says, "Don't just hope for a better Scotland, vote for one," which is almost word for word from an old Margaret Thatcher election slogan from the 1980s that they obviously didn't check on.
But Nippy there seems to have something under her nose. What's going on?
Yes. The night before the election, somebody has climbed up on this and given Nicola Sturgeon a small Hitler-type moustache, and I think that's something that perhaps we'll see more and more, because we do have increasingly a one-party state. They didn't get a majority. There is more opposition despite the collapse of the Labour Party. Now, the Labour Party in Scotland have collapsed enormously, and the collapse continues. They're now down to third in behind the Conservatives.
So there is the current situation. But in fact, that's the closing situation.
That's the final result, yes. So 24 seats out of 100 and, what is it, 129, I think it is. Yes, 129. So really quite a small group. They've very few first past the post victories. Most of that's in the PR system, topping up votes. A situation unimaginable 10 years ago. And the nationalists despite the polls a little while back, back in March, were suggesting the Nationalists would get 70 seats and a comfortable overall majority. Now they came just short of an overall majority, which is good for democracy in Scotland, I would say, because when they had an overall majority, they got exactly what they wanted, and that's one of the reasons we got named person and other such things, because all the committees. And the Scottish Parliament has only, it's one chamber, there's no revising chamber. So the checks and balances are meant to come from no party having overall control and a committee system. So when one party does have overall control, that overall control reflects in a majority on all the committees. And if, as in the case of the SNP, there's iron internal party discipline, then whatever the SNP leadership says they get, and you have something approaching an elected dictatorship.
I think the thing that perhaps concerns me a little bit, at least on paper, is the Tories are now the second party in Scotland. There have been hints that the relationship between the SNP and the Conservative Party might be a little unhealthy. So the question is the Conservative Party actually able to offer any kind of opposition in Scotland? Now, I appreciate that they have been the only major party that has supported the No to Name Person campaign. Is that why they've done so well? And will that opposition spread into other political areas?
The No to Name Person campaign and the Conservative support for it has been a big part of why they've had this resurgence and have become the second party in Holyrood. It's not the only reason. The continued decline of the Labour Party is one reason. And there's other areas where they've been opposing the Nationalists and being effectively the true opposition. The Labour Party, for quite a while, under the extremely doubtful leadership of Kezia Dugdale, was having some sort of policy of agreeing with the Nationalists wherever possible, and came across as very weak and seemed to have very little to say. And this all goes to the sort of left wing of Scottish politics being a very crowded area, so actually differentiating yourself from one party from another in that zone is very difficult. The Labour Party tried to outflank the Nationalists on the left and essentially failed. So there is some degree of what would have been called clear blue water, some degree of difference between the Conservatives and the Nationalists. And that shows very starkly and distinctly in areas like name person and defence of the family and individual rights. In other areas it's much less clear because all of these parties support some variety of the post-war consensus and all support a fairly large state. And the real choice that we get is actually extremely limited. But within the political system that we're working, we have over us, we're working within, then I think it's fair to say that the Conservatives are likely to be as effective an opposition as you're likely to find in Scottish politics or indeed in British politics.
What about UKIP? David, is there any UKIP presence in Scotland?
No, they didn't make the breakthrough. They thought they would. They were expecting to get perhaps several seats or at least one. They didn't make the breakthrough. There's been a lot of infighting, it would seem, in UKIP. But they did make a breakthrough, and a very useful breakthrough in Wales, where they've been gathering strength and gathering lots of votes without winning any seats in first past the post contests for some time. So here we see the Welsh Assembly results, and 5 UKIP members are elected, along with 10 from Plaid Cymru. Now, this is, from our point of view, this has got very hopefully beneficial effects to the Linda Lewis campaign, because there's people within Plaid Cymru and there's people within UKIP who are knowledgeable about the Linda Lewis case, are viewing it correctly, and seem to be willing to stand up and be counted on this. And the Labour Party, who have been blocking any progress on this case, are weakened, although they're still the largest party in Wales. They don't have an overall majority, and we will hopefully see blocks to actually discussing this in the Welsh Assembly being removed, and more publicity for this case.
I think the other noticeable thing from this is that the Liberal Democrats still have not been forgiven for coalition government.
No, they weren't wiped out. In Scotland, there was a suggestion at one point that they would be almost eliminated, and that didn't happen. But they're very much down at the minor end of the parties, along with the Green Party, and their position is, again, it's very inconsistent, because they claim to be a party of liberty, but they support government oversight of every family in the named person case, and there's other huge inconsistencies between what one part of the platform and another. So they still seem somewhat confused, but they seem to have, if you like, stopped the rot in Scotland at any rate.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Sorry, we're going to look at this headline, and I've kind of dropped this on you at the last minute, but the headline is losing the City of London really a price worth paying for Brexit? And I'm just going to say, discuss.
Well, there's many things in that title. I confess to having mixed emotions about the City of London. We have something that generates a great deal of income, essentially through fraud, and the rest of the country to some extent pays the price for this, and the rest of the world to some extent pays the price for this. So having a situation where the City of London would be seriously embarrassed would be perhaps very much in the long-term benefit for the whole of the planet. But I don't accept that that's really the choice we're looking at. It's another one of these false choices you see so often in political discussion, that you're being asked to believe that these are the options available, and they're clearly not, because in or out, the City of London will remain the City of London, and it will remain a centre of international fraud and theft and money printing and various financial deals that really should be ruled as crimes.
I don't know that we can say any more about that than that. It is a non-discussion, and really Brexit isn't going to do the job, but somebody should.
Yes, Brexit is not going to do the job. Although Brexit, I see a ramp up in the propaganda, particularly from the BBC on Brexit. I caught an advert for a Radio 4 programme that's coming forward in the next few days, and it's Europeans: our identity, I think was the title. So we're being very much told by the BBC that we're all Europeans now, and obviously Brexit would destroy the economy, and it'll be terrible, it'll be a catastrophe, and that's what we're being asked to believe. I'm not sure it's playing with the public, though. I think it's going to be quite tight.
Do you think it's going to be 50-50, a close run thing?
I think it'll be a close run thing. I don't get the feeling that there's an absolute turning against the European Union in the country, because all the PR and spin and newspaper headlines and BBC broadcasts will be having an effect, but it's not having the effect it had in 1975. 1975, it was the initial polls were 2/3 for exit, and they turned all the way around, and it was 2/3 for staying in. So the campaign had a huge effect. That's not happening this time. I suspect there was maybe a reliance in government circles that it would, but I don't feel that that's happening, and it's going to remain tight. And there is a certain amount of the PR is backfiring. I give you, for example, the wonderful intervention of Barry Soetoro, or Barack Obama, or whatever he's called this week, and who came across and told us all that we mustn't leave Europe, because otherwise we'd be at the back of the queue. That didn't go down well. In fact,
his argument was, if we leave Europe, we'll be at the back of the queue for these free trade, corporate fascist free trade agreements.
Yes,
and he
yes,
was trying to persuade us that that was a bad thing.
that is not a great threat. We're British and we like queuing, but B, what's on offer? Now the alternative view is let's go out on our own. Let's establish not fair trade, because fair trade is a word that means fascist trade agreements, which are only in the interest of big business and big government, such as TTIP. Right? Let's not do that. Let's go out and get free trade with whoever we can trade with. And if someone wants to subsidise goods and sell us goods at below the cost of production, fine, we'll take that too.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's move on. What's the Information Commissioner been up to?
Well, now the reason I raised this is, as you've been aware, we've been getting, shall we say, less than helpful responses from the Crown Office in Audit Scotland. We've got lots of good questions on the table, and we're told that they have the answers, but we're not allowed to know because we are only plebs, and this information would jeopardise the smooth running of government. Now, so we're about to appeal this to the Information Commissioner, and this is the lady concerned. Her name is Rosemary Agnew. Now, a well-informed source has given me a lot of background on this lady, which I can't go into right now, but suffice to say there are many issues of concern regarding integrity and reliability. And then I came across this article. Now, what has happened here is she had an appeal, and she had written up her decision for her appeal, and then the Scottish Government didn't like the wording. The Scottish Government didn't like the wording at all, and she was told to change it. A little summary here says, Scottish Government Commissioner Rosemary Agnew retrospectively redacted sentences from one of her own appeal decisions in 2013 after an agitated complaint from the government official worried about, quote, particular sensitivities, end quote. She agreed to remove text from her report despite her own concerns that the government's suggestion was inappropriate and would pose, quote, a reputational risk to my office, end quote, because of the loss of independence.
Yeah, yes, so that was what I was going to say. I thought the Information Commissioner was supposed to be independent.
Well, independence seems to have a variable meaning in the New Scotland. Independence doesn't seem to be independence from the government. It seems to be some form of government control. Now, this was questions that were asked about tuition fees and what would happen to tuition fees in the event of Scottish independence. The Scottish Government got lots of legal advice and legal reports from the Crown Office, which is normally only dealing with criminal cases. That's a slightly odd place to go, but that's where they went. I suppose it's cheaper legal advice than going out to them, the general lawyers. And this was then kept secret, and requests from journalists to get access to this information were refused. And it went to appeal to Rosemary Agnew. And although she didn't release the information, because the information is, let me get you the right phrase here, the information would substantially prejudice the effective conduct of public affairs. I want you to remember that phrase, substantially prejudice the effective conduct of public affairs. I think we're going to hear quite a lot more of that. I would point out that we talked earlier about the Nazi regime. Whatever you would say about the Nazi regime, no one would say they were not effective. They were most certainly effective. Nowhere in that sentence does it say just or lawful or honourable. No, it's the effective conduct of public affairs that we cannot prejudice. I find that particularly troubling.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I'm afraid I should have probably had this one a little bit sooner in the program, but this is Alistair the Looking Glass, and you wanted to highlight the anticlimax of the elections.
Yes, this is it's worth looking at this because it's sort of response that is becoming more and more frequent amongst people who think about Scottish politics and indeed politics in general. Because what we're seeing is the people involved are becoming ever more bland. Nicola Sturgeon, whatever else you might think of her, I would put it to you, is the bland leading the bland. And the bigger characters of years past don't seem to feature the same way. And the issues and choices are very much more restricted, and the whole process becomes ever less meaningful, so that many people are making an entirely thoughtful and sensible decision not to bother voting anymore.
But I mean, surely whenever you've got bland people selecting other bland people for to stand, you're only going to end up with bland people in the elections. There's no independence anymore, no real independent standing anymore. Yesterday, Alex Thompson was commenting on a Telegraph article which was highlighting a campaign being run by Lord Digby Jones to try and well, he says he's trying to sort of reinvigorate independent individuals standing for election. And he was prepared to put up some money in order to help them finance that. What was your view of that type of approach?
Well, I mean, I certainly welcome independent standing. I don't think it's going to turn this situation around, because the nature of politics and the nature of democracy is unless you have the rule of law, and these people change the law, and that's the basic problem. As long as you have a situation in which you can vote yourself other people's money, there's an open invitation to forms of corruption, high and low. And unless we can actually have a situation where people can stand independently, genuinely independently of government by standing on the law, I don't think we're going to see any significant improvement.
So how do we do that? Do we centrally fund campaigns and remove party funding for campaigns?
I think it's something else. I think it's ideas. I think we get the ideas, we get the knowledge. I was in a meeting in the run up to the Scottish independence referendum, and there were some people there protesting against the Police Scotland being armed, and they were very loud, they were very angry, they were very eloquent, and they were very good, and they were giving Kenny McCaskill a real hard time, which was obviously richly deserved. But we then went on to other things, and so these people were still in the audience, and they were asking things about the gold standard and about the real what money is, and it was wonderful because what was absolutely clear, McCaskill didn't know what they were talking about. He was completely out of his depth. And I think the more that we have an informed populace who can ask the hard questions, who will not accept the nonsense, the half answer, the answer that just asks you to look the other way or look squirrel, that sort of thing. As long as we're not going to fall for that, we stand a chance of forming a different way. But it has to be via free, independent people getting ideas, communicating with one another. I don't think it's going to be through parliaments and organisations and parties.
Quite possibly. Now we're going to have a short programme today. I do apologise for that, but we're going to end with this. And for the week of disposition, please look away now, because Tony Blair is 63 today. So we're saying happy birthday to Tony Blair. Hopefully it's his last as a free man. And David, you had a book you wanted to highlight.
Yes, a quick book recommendation. This is a book all about the Blair government, the early years of the Blair government. It's called Pretty Straight Guys, which is a Tony Blair quote. It's by Nick Cohen, and it details just some of the inequity, the deception, the self-deception, and the complete pulling the wool over the public's eyes that was going on in the Blair government, which was ultimately rotten to the core.
Yes, indeed. Okay, David, thank you very much for being with me today. Sorry that we've had a slightly shorter news programme than usual. I'm glad the conference went really well yesterday. We'll hear more about that from Brian on Monday, no doubt. And we'll see everybody at 1 o'clock as usual on Monday. Thanks for joining us. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Okay.